Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in Boston, Massachusetts. We are so happy that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We don't want you to miss an episode, so please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, at iTunes, at Spotify, at Podbean, or wherever you find your podcast. We have a wonderful guest today. She is the author of Dead Man's Jazz, Connie Dowell.
This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Jedley's totally interactive Magic Circus. Imagine a show where magic, illusions, comedy, music, and inspiration all come together as one. Imagine a show that has helped over 1 million young people and adults to change the way they approach life. A show that has shown people that being kind and respectful is fun. That show is Jedley's totally interactive Magic Circus, a transformative show that inspires young people to make healthy choices, be kind, and respectful. To find out more, please visit www.jedley.com or call 617-833-7063 today.
Join us on the line right now from Houston in Texas. She is the author of a number of fantastic young adult novels. And in fact, her latest one is going to be available in just a couple weeks. It's available for pre-order right now. The name of the book is Dead Man's Jazz. Please welcome to the show, author Connie Dowell. Connie, how are you?
Hi, doing great, Jed. Thanks for having me on the show.
I am really happy that you're here. Connie and I are both part of probably a couple of writing communities on Facebook, but certainly we're part of the Kidlit 411 community, which is a really thriving author community. And if there are any authors out there that are listening that aren't part of that community, I don't know, would you suggest that they jump on board and get into part of the fun?
Absolutely. If you write children's or young adult and just kind of figuring out the ins and outs of that, learning about how to do school visits, that alone the group was invaluable for.
Yeah. So. We just had one of the administrators of that group, Elaine, I always mess up her name, is Kylie Kearns on the program, and she was a lot of fun.
Great.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Dead Man's Jazz.
All right. So Dead Man's Jazz is the second in a series of young adult historical mysteries that starts. The first one starts right after the armistice of World War I, and the second one is set about 6 months later in the summer of 1919. So summer 100 years ago from now as you're listening. And it's set in Savanah. And the crux of it is that the two girls that are the sleuths of my mystery series, they're on vacation in Savanah, and they've been visiting a speakeasy, and they walk out of a speakeasy down the street and find a murdered jazz musician. And the police arrest a girl for the murder, and they know she didn't do it, but they can't prove it. So they have to investigate before the wrong girl is hanged for a crime she did not commit.
Wow, that sounds exciting. And I'm one of those guys. I love murder mysteries and detective stories, and so this sounds right up my alley. And I think part of the fun for me reading it, but also part of the fun for any young adult reading, and especially co-reading it with the parent, is for both the young person and the parent to just see how different life was 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You and I were talking a little bit earlier about how one part of the country, the Virginia area has changed in just the 10 or 15 years that I've been working down there. 100 years with all the technology and transportation really has really changed life in lots of ways.
Yeah, it's absolutely one of the the most fun elements of reading and writing historical fiction is seeing there's like the saying, the past is another country. This to kind of transport yourself to that other country, and seeing what's different, but also what's not changed as well. Because there's still a great deal that feels very modern and feels very contemporary about the year 1919.
Would you say, obviously the technology has changed, the landscape maybe has changed, although Savannah is still it's a pretty cool kind of, original place, I really love Savannah. But, while the things around us change, my thinking is the people haven't changed. I was almost alive in 1919, but I haven't noticed much of a change in the way people act in all my years here on Earth.
Yeah, I mean there's some constancies to human behavior and human nature that haven't changed, and like you said, there are some constancies to or at least some enduring qualities to the landscape and to the cities in which, you might set a historical novel. That Savannah has changed a lot in the last 100 years, but there's an aesthetic, that hasn't changed. And there's parts of Savannah that really look very similar, to the photographs of Savannah that I've been poring over from 100 years ago.
What drew you to Savannah?
Well, I lived in Georgia as a child and visited Savannah often, and it was always a really, intriguing and fun city. And setting this mystery series in Georgia, I knew I wanted to kind of change locations, several times and not set it all in the same small town, because then you kind of get Miss Marple syndrome. There's only murder mysteries. There's only so many murders you can have in a small area before people start to wonder about the body count. So yeah, Savannah seemed like a fun place to do that. And it was also a place that could, where I could put a lot of different elements of that period together. It's a place where early jazz flourished. And so it was a place where I could bring that in. It's, it's a place of kind of party and celebration, but also some darker elements to its past. And frankly, just aesthetically, it's got this wonderful Southern Gothic feel. It's a perfect place to set a murder.
And it's interesting that you chose jazz. One of the things I love about jazz, it's not my favorite genre of music, but I love it because it is, I think it's a genre of music that a lot of different people can enjoy and appreciate. And not only people of different cultures, but also people of different generations. I don't see many people my age sitting down and really getting into a Bad Bunny concert. But I think, kids today can sit down and enjoy a jazz concert with their parents and grandparents.
Yeah, they can. It's such an old genre. And there are a lot of old genres of music, but it's an old genre that's just endured for a long time. And I think that gives it more of a timeless appeal.
Now, we talked a little bit about what drew you to Savannah. What drew you as an author to writing murder mysteries, and especially historical fiction?
Okay, to answer that twofold, I grew up on mystery. I started reading mystery since I was a little girl, and I raided my mom's bookshelf and read stuff that was probably above my head, but I read it anyway. And we watched like the 90s Poirot and the Midsummer Murders every Sunday and tried to guess who did it. So it was a really natural choice there. As for historical fiction, I think just having a general interest in history, and specifically in Georgia history, growing up there and going to the University of Georgia, where like you trip over historical markers, it made the past really come alive for me.
One of the things I love about mysteries and detective stories and murder mysteries is that it's a really fun. It seems like a really fun and natural thing for parents and kids to co-read together, because it just has that natural whodunit kind of discussion topic where you don't have to get into anything heavy. If you do, if you want to get into something heavy, that's great. But just spending time sitting down thinking about whodunit and why you think that way, and that can be a lot of fun and really build and help parents and kids grow closer together, I think.
Yeah, it absolutely can. That puzzle aspect. I mean, that's what drew me in, what made me and my mom and my sister bond over mysteries, is because we did, it's fun to read them and watch them alone, but it was even more fun to do it together because we could stop and go, well, I think that guy did it because he had this tell over here, or what about this guy's alibi? And so it became more of a shared experience. Now,
I guess one of the things that I had a question about is you chose two girls at a time, who had to go out and do something very brave. It's very brave for a kid to stand up and I mean, it's hard for a kid to stand up at school and say, my friend's being bullied. You should do something about it. For your character to stand up and say, hey, this person has been charged with murder and it's unfair. That's hard for anybody, but especially for two young women to do back in that time in history.
Yeah, it is. But it's kind of a theme of this whole series is about empowering young people and especially young women or just marginalized genders in general to stand up for themselves and to believe in themselves enough to make those kind of scary choices. Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you did intentionally when you started writing the book, or did it just happen as the characters were coming together?
It's something that kind of, I mean, when I first had the idea for the first book, I didn't really know where the series was going. Mm-hmm. It sort of grew naturally, and then as I got more firm plotting, I started building that element in more intentionally. Mm-hmm.
I think it's wonderful. I think we always talk about how important it is for young kids to see themselves represented in books, and I think it's really important for every person to be able to see themselves represented in some ways, especially in characters who have the strength to stand up for themselves. I think that's so very, very important for everyone to learn.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned that you've written a number of novels, and I want to ask you about one that really kind of caught my eye. And it kind of shows that even though I'm almost 100 years old, I'm still have the mind of a third grader. And so the one that caught my eye was The Orchid Caper, a novel of thievery and flatulence. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. My fart heist novel. It's the one that people either love or they absolutely hate. And I had no idea until I wrote and published it how many people hate farts. Well, there's a lot of people. But
I love that fart heist. And that could be a new subgenre in the future, and I don't know if it's listed on Amazon in that way.
It could be, but it was for me. It was writing it. It was a palate cleanser between the two really heavily researched historical fiction, which I love writing, and I put my heart and my soul in it, but it's intense, and I needed to write something kind of a little bit lighter and fluffier and without so much research behind it. So I wrote the story of a college-aged burglar who gets caught when her Mark comes home too early. She has to hide in the closet, but her farts give her away. And somehow this leads her to go on a heist. and silly hijinks ensue.
Oh my goodness, Well, one reason people might be upset, in addition to just being upset with farts, is the idea of a female farting. That's just like unheard of. Like females aren't human.
I know. People have this idea. I don't think it's women that have this idea, but people have this idea that like women don't find fart jokes funny. Well, just to show you, I wrote an entire book based around a fart joke because I'm a woman and I think fart's hilarious.
Well, one of my favorite jokes in it, and I didn't realize how quote unquote controversial it was until I told it at a school in North Carolina, and it was it's kind of like a silly little riddle. Hey, what's invisible and smells like carrots? Bunny farts.
Oh, bunny farts.
Bunny farts, yes. And kids love it, but the teachers at that school didn't. So anyway, so Orchid Caper. You also like to write about writing.
Yes. But my first book was a book about academic writing for new college students.
That's a huge thing. One of the things that I hear is that there are a lot of students showing up in college and they don't have a clue how to properly structure a paper.
Yeah, I wrote that book when I was the coordinator for a university writing center, and that is what I see. I see people walking in, either they'd not been to college, or they didn't go to college straight out of high school and they'd forgotten a lot, or even freshmen who had come straight from high school who didn't really know how to properly. They might have a grasp of the 5-paragraph essay. Maybe we should cite things, but they didn't really know, how to plan, what ought to be cited, how to really structure it best, and most importantly, how to plan their time and research.
So what's the name of that book so parents can be aware of it?
Yes. So it's called You Can Love Writing, subtitled A Guide to Get Through Your College Papers and Like It.
Excellent. Now, you were mentioning that Dead Man's Jazz is part of a series, but we didn't talk about the first book in the series. Why don't you let us know about that?
Sure. The first book of the series, it's a little shorter than Dead Man's Jazz is going to be. It's called The Poison in All of Us, and it's set in December 1918. And in that book, Emmy and Dessi, my two characters, they don't start out as friends. They're kind of wary of each other at first, but they're home for Christmas vacation in their small town, and they're visiting a prominent lady there, the most prominent suffragist in their small town, and they find her lying dead on the floor. And as suffrage and anti-suffrage activists their fights get louder and louder, and newer and scarier things happen, Emmy and Dessi decide they have to work together before more women are killed.
That sounds fascinating. Now, does someone need to read the first book to be able to enjoy Dead Man's Jazz, or can they jump in the middle, kind of?
You can jump in the middle. Yeah. So I try to write them so that you can jump in at any point, and even go backwards if you want to, and it won't be. I try not to mention too much about the first plot, so I won't spoil the ending of the first book if you hop backward. It's something that I love about mystery series is that typically you can hop in at any point. I guess the only thing, there are a few things that are spoiled in the second book, but just like relationships between characters, and obviously they do become friends at the end of the book.
That's
but
awesome.
I don't think that was a big surprise.
Now, where can folks, we mentioned that Dead Man's Jazz is going to be available towards the end of June of 2019. Where can they pre-order it now?
All right. You can pre-order it exclusively on Amazon. And when it is released, then The paperback versions will be available pretty much wherever books are sold. If your local store doesn't have them, you can ask them to order it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really helpful for an author. Anytime you go into a store and you request a book specifically, and also the same thing at a library. In fact, if you discover a book and you love it, and even if you own it and you read it, go to your library and suggest it. Ask them to get it, and then that way they'll get it.
Yeah, and then more people get to read that book.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I know folks are going to want to find out more about you and also connect so that they can know when the next work from Connie Dowell is coming out. So where can people connect with you online?
Absolutely. So you can find me at ConnieBDowell.com, and that's got information about my books and links to all the stuff I do online. And that's the number one place to go.
Awesome. Well, we've been chatting tonight to the author of the soon-to-be-released young adult novel, Dead Man's Jazz, Connie B Dowell. Connie, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be the meteorologist for CBS San Francisco, our friend Paul Diano. He's back to tell us all about his brand new book, Wild Weather Hurricanes. We're really excited to bring Paul back to the show. His first book, Wild Weather, that started off his series, is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. If you are an author and you're looking to help your book stand out amongst the crowd of all the other books, all the other children's books that are published every month, you might want to have your book considered for our Reading with Your Kids certified great read program. We have a panel of educators, parents, and kids, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. And with that status comes all sorts of great tools to help you promote your book, to help your book stand out, to let families know that your book would be a great addition to their family library. You can find out more about it by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Hey, we want to thank Connie Dowell for being here today. Be sure to check out her new book, Dead Man's Jazz. We also want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan, for all she does for the podcast. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of the support that she gives me. And of course, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for subscribing to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, on Stitcher Radio, on Apple Podcast, on Himalaya, Podbean, wherever you find your podcast. And most of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.